David Martinez wiped the sweat from his forehead as he loaded the last box into his pickup truck. The moving company had left hours ago, but there were still personal items he wanted to handle himself. His 8-year-old daughter Emma sat on the porch steps of their new house, drawing pictures in her sketchbook while keeping one eye on their new neighborhood. "Dad, can we explore the woods behind our house tomorrow?" Emma asked, pointing to the thick tree line that bordered their backyard. The forest stretched for miles, creating a natural barrier between their quiet suburb and the busy highway beyond. "We'll see, Mia," David replied, using the Spanish nickname he'd called her since she was born. "Let's get settled in first." The divorce had been finalized 6 months ago, and David had finally saved enough money to buy this small house on Maple Street. It wasn't much, but it had 3 bedrooms, a decent kitchen, and most importantly, it was theirs. Emma would have her own room for the first time in months after staying in his cramped apartment, where she'd been sleeping on a pull-out couch. David worked as a mechanic at Peterson's auto shop downtown. The pay wasn't great, but his boss Pete was understanding about his situation. Single parenthood wasn't easy, especially when your ex-wife had decided that motherhood wasn't for her and moved to California with her new boyfriend. Emma rarely talked about her mother anymore, which both broke David's heart and made him proud of how strong his little girl had become. As the sun began to set, David noticed something odd. A car was parked at the edge of the forest, barely visible through the trees. It had been there when they arrived that morning, and it didn't belong to any of the neighbors he'd met. The vehicle looked official, dark blue with what appeared to be government plates. "Emma, go inside and start unpacking your toys," David said, his instincts telling him something wasn't right. "I'll be right back." He walked across his backyard toward the tree line, his work boots crunching on fallen leaves. The October air was crisp and twilight was settling over the forest. As he got closer to the car, he could see it was indeed a police vehicle, but something was wrong. The driver's side door was hanging open and the interior light was on. David approached cautiously, calling out, "Hello? Is someone there? Do you need help?" No response came from the car, but he heard something else, a weak moan coming from deeper in the woods. Every instinct told him to go back to the house and call 911, but the sound was so faint and desperate that he couldn't ignore it. He pulled out his cell phone and turned on the flashlight, following the sound into the forest. Broken branches and disturbed leaves created a trail that led about 50 yards from the road. That's when he found her. A woman in a police uniform was lying against a large oak tree, barely conscious. Her dark hair was matted with blood, and her left arm hung at an unnatural angle. Her badge identified her as Officer S. Chen from the Metro Police Department. She looked to be in her early 30s, and even in her injured state, David could see she was struggling to stay alert. "Officer Chen, can you hear me?" David knelt beside her, careful not to move her in case she had spinal injuries. "My name is David. I live right over there. I'm going to help you." The officer's eyes fluttered open, and she tried to speak but only managed to whisper. "Radio. In car. Call for backup." David looked back toward the patrol car. It would take him at least 2 minutes to run there and back, and he wasn't sure she had that much time. Her breathing was shallow, and he could see she was going into shock. "I'm going to call 911 first, then get your radio," he said, dialing emergency services. "Stay with me, Officer Chen." "Wevin, what's your emergency?" "I found an injured police officer in the woods behind 412 Maple Street. She's conscious but badly hurt. I think she has a head injury and possibly a broken arm. We need paramedics immediately." "Sir, did you see what happened to the officer?" "No, I just moved into the house today and found her car abandoned. She's been here for a while. Her injuries look serious." While staying on the line with dispatch, David carefully removed his jacket and placed it over the officer to help prevent shock. She was shivering despite the mild evening temperature. "Officer Chen, what's your first name?" he asked, trying to keep her talking. "Sarah," she whispered. "Sarah Chen." "Okay, Sarah, the paramedics are on their way." "Can you tell me what happened?" Sarah's eyes struggled to focus on him. "Was following someone. They knew I was coming. Ambush. Who were you following?" Before Sarah could answer, they heard the distant sound of sirens approaching. David felt relief wash over him, but also a growing concern about what Sarah had stumbled into. This wasn't a traffic accident or a simple patrol gone wrong. Someone had deliberately hurt this officer. "Sarah, stay awake for me," David said as her eyes began to close again. "Help is almost here," Emma's voice called from the backyard. Dad, where are you? I'm okay, Emma. Stay by the house. There are going to be ambulances and police cars coming. The sirens grew louder, and soon David could see flashing lights through the trees. Within minutes, the quiet forest was filled with paramedics, police officers, and investigators. David was asked to step back while the medical team worked on Sarah, but he couldn't shake the feeling that finding her wasn't just a coincidence. As they loaded Sarah into the ambulance, one of the paramedics approached David. You probably saved her life. Another hour out here and hypothermia could have killed her. Watching the ambulance drive away, David realized that his quiet new life in the suburbs had just become much more complicated. Detective Robert Kane arrived at David's house 3 hours after the ambulance had left. Emma was already asleep, exhausted from the excitement and the long day of moving. David sat on his front porch, still wearing the same clothes from earlier, now stained with Sarah's blood. Mr. Martinez, I'm Detective Kane. I need to ask you some questions about finding Officer Chen. David nodded, gesturing to the empty chair beside him. Of course. How is she doing? She's stable. Concussion, broken arm, and several deep cuts, but she'll recover. The doctors say you finding her when you did probably saved her life. Kane pulled out a notebook and pen. Can you walk me through exactly what happened? Start from when you first noticed the patrol car. David recounted the evening's events in detail. Kane took careful notes, occasionally asking for clarification about timing or exactly where he'd found Sarah in the woods. Officer Chen mentioned she was following someone when she was attacked. Did she say anything else about that? She said someone knew she was coming and that it was an ambush. That's all she could manage before you guys arrived. Detective Kane looked troubled. Mr. Martinez, I need to ask you directly. Do you have any connection to Officer Chen? Had you ever seen her before tonight? Never. We just moved here this morning from across town. I don't know anyone in this neighborhood yet, let alone any police officers. What about your ex-wife? Any connection there? David felt a flash of anger but kept his voice level. My ex-wife lives in California now. She left Emma and me 8 months ago. I can give you her contact information if you need it, but I can't imagine how she'd be connected to this. Kane studied David's face carefully. I had to ask. Officer Chen was working on a sensitive case involving domestic violence and child custody issues. We're exploring all possible connections. After another 30 minutes of questions, Kane closed his notebook. Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Martinez. We may need to speak with you again as the investigation continues. Detective, can I ask what hospital they took her to? I'd like to check on her condition if that's allowed. Kane hesitated. Mercy General. But Mr. Martinez, Officer Chen is part of an ongoing investigation. I'd recommend letting us handle this professionally. The next morning, David dropped Emma off at her new school and took a few hours of personal time from work. He couldn't stop thinking about Sarah lying alone in that hospital. The look of fear in her eyes when she'd whispered about the ambush haunted him. Mercy General Hospital was busy with the usual morning rush of visitors and staff. David approached the information desk with a small bouquet of flowers. He'd picked up from the hospital gift. Shop. I'm here to see Officer Sarah Chen. She was brought in last night. The volunteer at the desk typed into her computer. Are you family? No, I'm the one who found her. I just wanted to check on her condition. I'm sorry, but Officer Chen is in the ICU and can only receive visits from immediate family. You could leave the flowers at the nurse's station. David was about to leave when he heard a familiar voice behind him. David? Is that you? He turned to see Sarah sitting in a wheelchair, being pushed by a nurse. Her head was bandaged, her left arm was in a cast, and she had several stitches above her right eyebrow. But she was awake and alert. Sarah, I wasn't sure if you'd remember me. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck, she said with a weak smile. But alive, thanks to you. The doctor said you probably saved my life. The nurse pushing her wheelchair looked between them. Officer Chen, you should be resting. The doctor said only 15 minutes for this physical therapy session. Could we sit in the garden area for a few minutes? Sarah asked. I need some fresh air, and I'd like to thank David properly. The hospital's small garden was peaceful, with benches surrounded by well-maintained flower beds. David sat across from Sarah, still amazed by how different she looked from the barely conscious woman he'd found in the woods. I remember more now, Sarah said. I was following a lead on a case involving a missing child. The tip led me to those woods behind your house. Someone called in saying they'd seen suspicious activity there. What kind of suspicious activity? Sarah hesitated. People meeting at night exchanging something. Could have been drugs. Could have been something worse. When I got to the location, I realized it was a trap. Someone knew exactly where I'd be and when. Do you think it's connected to the missing child case? I don't know yet. My partner, Detective Williams, is looking into it. But David, I need to warn you. If someone was using those woods for illegal activities, living right there might put you and your daughter in danger. David felt his stomach drop. Emma. She wanted to explore those woods. I told her we'd do it this weekend. Don't let her go back there alone. In fact, maybe avoid that area entirely until we figure out what's going on. A young girl's voice called from the hospital entrance. Dad? David turned to see Emma running toward them, followed by an older woman. Mrs. Rodriguez from next door offered to pick her up from school since I wasn't there. David explained to Sarah. Emma, come here. I want you to meet someone. Emma approached shyly, staying close to her father. Is this the police lady you found in the woods? Yes, this is Officer Sarah Chen. Sarah, this is my daughter Emma. Sarah smiled warmly despite her obvious pain. It's nice to meet you, Emma. Your dad is a hero, you know. He saved my life. Emma beamed with pride. My dad fixes cars and makes the best pancakes, too. That sounds like a very talented dad. Mrs. Rodriguez joined them, a concerned expression on her face. David, there have been unmarked cars driving through the neighborhood all day. People are talking about what happened last night. Sarah and David exchanged glances. What kind of unmarked cars? Sarah asked. Dark sedans with tinted windows. They slow down when they pass your house, David. Sarah's expression grew serious. David, I think you and Emma should consider staying somewhere else for a few days. At least until we know more about what's going on. We just moved in yesterday. All our stuff is there. I understand, but your safety is more important than belongings. Emma tugged on her father's sleeve. Dad, what's wrong? Are we in trouble? David knelt down to Emma's level. No, Mija, we're not in trouble. But we might need to have a little adventure and stay somewhere else for a few days just to be safe. As if on cue, David's phone rang. Detective Kane's name appeared on the screen. Mr. Martinez, we need to talk. Can you come to the station this afternoon? And bring your daughter. We think it might be safer if you're both here while we sort some things out. Sarah reached out and touched David's arm with her good hand. David, whatever this is about, you did the right thing helping me. Don't let anyone make you regret that. Looking at Sarah's determined face and Emma's trusting eyes, David realized that his quiet new life had just become the center of something much bigger and more dangerous than he'd ever imagined. The Metro Police Department looked more like a fortress than David had expected. Multiple squad cars were parked outside, and officers in tactical gear stood near the entrance. Detective Kane met them at the front desk, his expression more serious than it had been the night before. Thank you for coming in, Mr. Martinez. Emma, there's a play area where you can wait while your dad and I talk. Emma clung to David's hand. I want to stay with my dad. It's okay, Mija, David said, but he felt uneasy about separating from his daughter. Detective Kane, if it's all the same to you, I'd prefer Emma stays with me. Whatever you need to discuss, I don't want her out of my sight right now. Kane nodded understandingly. That's probably wise. Let's go to conference room B. It's more comfortable than my office. The conference room had a large table, whiteboards covered with photos and documents, and a corner with some children's books and toys. Emma settled into the corner with a coloring book while Kane spread several files across the table. Mr. Martinez, what I'm about to tell you is part of an ongoing investigation, but you have a right to know since you're potentially in danger. Kane opened the first file, revealing photos of a young boy who looked to be about Emma's age. This is Tommy Brennan, age 9. He disappeared 3 weeks ago during a custody exchange between his divorced parents. His mother claimed his father took him and violated the custody agreement. His father insisted he never showed up for the scheduled pickup. David studied the photo. The boy had sandy brown hair and freckles, and he was wearing a baseball uniform. What does this have to do with what happened to Officer Chen? Officer Chen was one of the lead investigators on Tommy's case. She'd been following a tip that led her to believe Tommy might be held somewhere in the forest area behind your house. Kane opened another file, this one containing surveillance photos of men in dark clothing meeting near cars. These photos were taken 2 weeks ago by a trail camera a hunter had set up about a mile from your property. Notice anything? David examined the grainy images. That looks like the same area where I found Officer Chen's car. Exactly. We believe there's an organized group involved in Tommy's disappearance and possibly other missing children cases. Officer Chen was getting close to identifying the location of their operations. Emma looked up from her coloring book. Dad, why is that little boy missing? David's heart ached as he tried to find an age-appropriate answer. Sometimes bad people take children away from their families, Emma, but the police work very hard to find them and bring them home safely. Kane continued. The problem is, someone within our department may have warned the suspects that Officer Chen was closing in. The attack on her wasn't random, it was planned. You think there's a corrupt cop involved? It's looking that way. Only 5 people knew about Officer Chen's investigation that night, and only 3 knew the specific location she was heading to. David felt a chill run down his spine. So the people who hurt Sarah might know that I found her, and they might know where Emma and I live. That's exactly what we're worried about. We've had unmarked units watching your house, but we can't provide round-the-clock protection indefinitely. The conference room door opened, and Sarah walked in, still wearing her hospital gown under a police department jacket. Her arm was in a sling, and she moved slowly, but her eyes were alert and determined. Sarah, what are you doing here? Kane asked. The doctor said you needed at least 48 hours of observation. I discharged myself against medical advice. We don't have time to wait. Sarah sat down carefully, wincing as she moved. David, Emma, I'm sorry you're caught up in this. Emma brightened when she saw Sarah. Are you feeling better, Officer Sarah? Much better, thanks to your dad. Emma, can you keep coloring while we talk about grown-up stuff? Sarah turned to Kane and David. I remembered something else while I was in the hospital. The voice I heard right before I was attacked. It was familiar. I think it was someone I work with. Kane leaned forward. Are you sure? No, but sure enough that I don't trust anyone else in the department right now except you and Detective Williams. So what do we do? David asked. I can't keep Emma away from school and her normal life indefinitely, and I need to work to pay our bills. Sarah looked at Emma, who was intently coloring a picture of a family standing in front of a house. David, there might be another option. My cabin is about 2 hours north of here, near the lake. It's isolated off the grid and only a few people know about it. You and Emma could stay there while we work this case. I can't ask you to do that. You barely know us, but you saved my life. And more importantly, this situation exists because of my investigation. I feel responsible for putting you in danger. Kane studied the map on his phone. It's not a bad idea, actually. Remote location, easy to secure, and if there is a leak in the department, no one would think to look there. Emma had been listening despite appearing focused on her coloring. Dad, would we be like camping? David looked between Sarah and Kane, weighing their options. How long are we talking about? Hopefully just a few days, Sarah said. Detective Williams and I have some leads we've been developing separately. If we can identify who leaked my location and find where Tommy is being held, this could be over quickly. And if you can't? Sarah's expression grew somber. Then we'll need to consider more permanent protection options. Kane's radio crackled to life. Detective Kane, we have a situation at 412 Maple Street. Someone broke into the Martinez residence. Everyone in the room froze. Emma dropped her crayons and looked at her father with wide, frightened eyes. When? Kane asked into his radio. Happened sometime in the last hour. Neighbors reported the front door was kicked in. House appears to have been searched but not burglarized. No valuables taken. David felt his anger rising. They were looking for something, but what? We just moved in yesterday. Sarah struggled to stand, her face pale but determined. They were looking for evidence that you might have seen something when you found me. Or they wanted to see if I'd given you anything before the paramedics arrived. But you didn't give me anything. They don't know that. Kane was already gathering the files from the table. Okay, decision made. David, you and Emma are going to the cabin with Officer Chen. I'll have Detective Williams meet you there with supplies and equipment. Emma tugged on David's shirt. Dad, what about my new room? And my stuff? David knelt down and hugged his daughter. We'll come back for everything, Mija. Right now we need to help Officer Sarah catch the bad guys who hurt her. Emma nodded solemnly, then looked at Sarah. Don't worry, Officer Sarah. My dad is really good at fixing things. He'll help you catch them. As they prepared to leave the police station, David realized that his simple life as a single father had just become infinitely more complicated. But looking at Sarah's determined face and Emma's trusting expression, he knew he'd made the right choice in helping them both. The question now was whether they could solve this case before the corrupt officers and their criminal partners found them at the cabin. The drive to Sarah's cabin took them through winding mountain roads that seemed to lead further away from civilization with each mile. Emma sat in the back seat, alternating between excitement about their adventure and worry about leaving behind her new room. Sarah rode in the passenger seat, directing David through turns that weren't marked on any GPS system. "Turn left at that big pine tree with the lightning scar," Sarah said, pointing to a massive tree that had clearly been struck years ago. "The driveway is about 50 yards past it, but it's easy to miss." David almost drove past the narrow dirt path that disappeared into thick woods. "Are you sure this leads to a cabin? It looks like a hiking trail." "That's the point. My grandfather built this place in the 1960s when he wanted to get away from the world. He was a police officer too, actually. 30 years with the force before he retired up here." The driveway wound through dense forest for nearly a mile before opening into a small clearing. The cabin was larger than David had expected. A 2-story log structure with a wraparound porch and large windows facing a pristine lake. Solar panels on the roof and a small generator shed indicated the place was designed for off-grid living. "It's beautiful," Emma said, pressing her face against the car window. "Look at the lake, Dad. Can we go swimming?" "Maybe, Mika, but the water's probably pretty cold in October." Sarah smiled despite her obvious pain from the long car ride. "There's a wood-burning stove inside and plenty of blankets. My grandfather always said this place could keep a family warm and fed even in the worst weather." As they unloaded their few belongings, Detective Williams arrived in an unmarked SUV. He was a tall, lean man in his 40s with graying hair and tired eyes that suggested he'd seen too much during his career. "Sarah, you should still be in the hospital," he said, embracing her carefully. "How's the arm?" "It'll heal." "Did you bring the case files?" Williams nodded, pulling several boxes from his vehicle. "Everything we have on Tommy Brennan, plus the 3 other missing children cases from the past 2 years that might be connected." "3 other missing children?" David asked, helping carry boxes into the cabin. "We think Tommy's disappearance is part of a larger pattern," Williams explained. "All boys between 8 and 10 years old, all from broken homes with custody disputes, all disappeared during or around scheduled parent exchanges." The cabin's interior was rustic but comfortable, with a large stone fireplace, a fully equipped kitchen, and furniture that looked handmade. Emma immediately gravitated toward a bookshelf filled with children's books and board games. "Your grandfather had kids?" David asked Sarah as she settled onto the couch with obvious relief. 6 grandchildren who spent every summer here. He always said this place was meant for families." Sarah paused, watching Emma examine the books. "I inherited it when he passed 5 years ago, but I haven't brought anyone else here since then." Williams spread the case files across the dining table. "Sarah, before we get into this, I need to tell you something. Internal Affairs opened an investigation this morning into who leaked your location." "Good. Did they narrow down the suspects?" 3 officers had access to your operational plan: Sergeant Morrison, Detective Bradley, and Lieutenant Hayes. Sarah's face went pale. "Tom Hayes? He's been my mentor since I joined the force. I know this is hard, but we have to consider everyone. The leak came from someone with access to classified information." David lit a fire in the fireplace while listening to their conversation. "Sarah, is there anyone in the department you absolutely trust?" "Detective Williams, obviously. Captain Rodriguez has always been straight with me. But honestly, I'm starting to question everyone else." Emma had found a puzzle featuring lake wildlife and spread it out on the coffee table. "Officer Sarah, will you help me with this puzzle? Dad's not very good at the sky parts." Sarah smiled genuinely for the first time since they'd left the hospital. "I'd love to help, but you have to call me just Sarah now. We're friends, not just officer and citizen." As Emma and Sarah worked on the puzzle, David and Williams reviewed the missing children files. The pattern was disturbing. Each child had disappeared during a contentious custody situation, and in each case, both parents had alibis for the time of disappearance. "It's like someone is specifically targeting these families," David observed. "But why? What's the motive?" Williams pulled out a separate folder. "We think it might be connected to illegal adoption networks. Children from troubled homes are taken and sold to families who can't adopt through legal channels. That's horrible. These poor kids, The good news is that if we're right, the children are probably alive and being cared for by their new families who don't know they're stolen. The bad news is that tracking down illegal adoption networks is incredibly difficult. Sarah looked up from the puzzle. David, there's something else you should know. The reason I was so determined to follow up on the tip about activity in those woods, I was adopted myself. When I was 7, Emma stopped working on the puzzle and looked at Sarah with new interest. You were adopted too? I kind of am too. My mom left, so now it's just me and Dad. It's not exactly the same thing, Emma, but I understand what it's like when your family situation is different from other kids. Williams checked his watch. I need to head back to the city. Sarah, you have the encrypted radio if you need to reach me. And David, thank you for protecting both Sarah and Emma by bringing them here. After Williams left, the three of them settled into an evening routine. David cooked dinner using supplies Williams had brought, while Sarah and Emma finished the puzzle. Despite the serious circumstances that brought them together, the atmosphere felt surprisingly normal. Dad, can Sarah tell me a bedtime story? Emma asked as David tucked her into the cabin's guest bedroom. If Sarah's feeling up to it. But remember, she's still recovering from her injuries. Sarah appeared in the doorway. I'd be happy to tell you a story, Emma. How about I tell you about the time my grandfather caught the biggest fish in this entire lake? As Sarah settled into the chair beside Emma's bed, David watched from the doorway. There was something natural about the way Sarah interacted with his daughter, something that made his chest feel warm despite all the danger surrounding them. Later, after Emma had fallen asleep, David and Sarah sat by the fireplace with cups of hot chocolate. Thank you, Sarah said quietly, for everything. For finding me, for protecting Emma, for coming here with me. You don't need to thank me. We're all in this together now. Sarah stared into the fire. David, can I ask you something personal? What happened with Emma's mother? David was quiet for a long moment. Maria decided that being a wife and mother wasn't what she wanted after all. She met someone online who promised her a different life in California. One day I came home from work and found a note saying she was sorry but she had to follow her dreams. That must have been devastating. For me, yes. But Emma barely asks about her anymore. Kids are more resilient than we think, Sarah nodded. I never knew my birth parents. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if they'd kept me. But my adoptive parents were wonderful. They died in a car accident when I was 22, which is why I became a police officer. I wanted to help other people the way the officers helped me when I was alone and scared. As the fire crackled and the lake lapped gently against the shore outside, David realized that despite the circumstances, he felt more at peace than he had in months. But that peace was shattered when Sarah's encrypted radio crackled to life. Sarah, this is Williams. We found something. Tommy Brennan's father was just arrested for attempted murder. The case just got a lot more complicated. Sarah grabbed the encrypted radio with her good hand, her face tense with concentration. Williams, what do you mean Tommy's father was arrested? For attempted murder of who? His ex-wife, Tommy's mother. Jennifer Brennan was attacked in her apartment 2 hours ago. She's alive, but in critical condition. Robert Brennan was found 3 blocks away with blood on his clothes and no alibi. David moved closer to hear the conversation better. That doesn't make sense. If he took Tommy, why would he attack the mother now 3 weeks later? William's voice crackled through the static. That's what's bothering us too. Either we've been completely wrong about this case or someone is setting Robert Brennan up to take the fall. Sarah paced to the window, looking out at the dark lake. Williams, what was Jennifer Brennan's condition when you interviewed her about Tommy's disappearance? Cooperative but evasive. She insisted Robert took Tommy, but she couldn't provide any evidence. Said she was afraid of him, but there was no history of domestic violence in their records. And now she's attacked right when we're getting close to the real perpetrators. That's not a coincidence. Emma appeared at the top of the stairs in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. Dad, why is everyone talking so loud? David quickly went to comfort his daughter. Sorry, Mija. Sarah had to take an important work call. Go back to bed, okay? Can I have some water first? While David helped Emma get a drink and settled her back in bed, Sarah continued her conversation with Williams. By the time David returned, her expression was grim. What did he say? David asked. Jennifer Brennan regained consciousness an hour ago. She told the doctors that her attacker asked her where she'd hidden the evidence before he hit her. But Robert Brennan has been in custody for questioning about Tommy's disappearance for the past 6 hours. So he couldn't have attacked her. Exactly, Someone wanted us to think he did it. Williams is releasing him and putting him in protective custody. David sat down heavily on the couch. Sarah, this is getting more complicated by the hour. How many people are involved in this thing? I don't know, but I'm starting to think it goes deeper than just an illegal adoption ring. Sarah moved to the dining table where Williams had left the case files. David, can you help me look through these again? Maybe we missed something. They spent the next 2 hours going through every detail of the 4 missing children cases. David's mechanical mind proved helpful in spotting patterns that Sarah's emotional connection to the case had obscured. Look at this, David said, pointing to the timeline Williams had created. Each child disappeared within 2 weeks of their parents' divorce being finalized. Not during the proceedings, but after. You're right. But why is that significant? Because that's when custody arrangements become official and when financial settlements are completed. Someone had access to family court records and was targeting specific types of cases. Sarah's eyes widened. David, that's brilliant. Someone in the court system, or someone with access to those records, was identifying vulnerable families. But who would have that kind of access? Before Sarah could answer, they heard the distant sound of a car engine approaching through the woods. Both of them froze, listening intently. Are you expecting anyone else? David whispered. No. Williams said he wouldn't be back until tomorrow morning. The engine sound stopped somewhere along the access road, still hidden by the forest. Sarah moved to turn off the cabin's lights while David checked that Emma was still sleeping peacefully upstairs. There's a back exit through the kitchen that leads to a path down to the lake, Sarah whispered. If we need to run, we can take the canoe across to the other shore. I'm not leaving Emma, I wouldn't ask you to, but we need to be prepared. They waited in the darkness for several minutes, listening for footsteps or voices. Instead, they heard the car engine start again and drive away. But neither of them felt relieved. That was reconnaissance, Sarah said. Someone was checking to see if we're here. How could they have found us? You said only a few people knew about this place. Sarah's face went pale in the moonlight streaming through the windows. I told Lieutenant Hayes about the cabin last year when he was asking about my family history. He said he was interested in police families and their traditions. The same Lieutenant Hayes who's one of the 3 suspects for leaking your location. Yes. David, we might not be safe here anymore. They spent the rest of the night taking turns keeping watch while the other dozed fitfully on the couch. Emma slept soundly upstairs, unaware of the tension below. As dawn broke over the lake, David found himself watching Sarah as she stared out the window, her injured arm cradled against her chest. Sarah, can I ask you something? Why did you become so invested in Tommy's case specifically? Sarah was quiet for a long time. Because when I was 7, before my adoption was finalized, I was taken by someone involved in an illegal adoption scheme. I was missing for 6 days before the police found me. David felt his stomach clench. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. It's why I became a cop, and it's why I can't let this case go. Tommy and those other children are living the nightmare I escaped from. Emma's voice called from upstairs. Dad, Sarah, are you making breakfast? I smell something cooking. David realized that in his exhaustion he'd gotten up early and started making pancakes without consciously deciding to do so. Coming, Emma. As they gathered around the small kitchen table for breakfast, Emma chattered excitedly about the dream she'd had about catching fish in the lake. Her innocence and joy felt like a bright spot in the increasingly dark situation. Sarah, after we catch the bad guys, will you come visit us at our real house? Emma asked between bites of pancake. I'd like that very much. Emma. David caught Sarah's eye across the table, and for a moment, he allowed himself to imagine what it would be like if this were their normal life. The 3 of them sharing breakfast in a cozy cabin, planning their day together. That fantasy was interrupted by the encrypted radio crackling to life again. Sarah, this is Williams, emergency. Lieutenant Hayes didn't show up for work this morning and his apartment is empty. His landlord says he moved out in the middle of the night. We think he's run. Sarah grabbed the radio. Williams, we had someone checking out the cabin last night. Hayes knows about this place. Pack up and get out of there now. I'm sending a team to escort you to a safe house in the city. As they hastily packed their few belongings, Emma sensed the urgency and became quiet and worried. Dad, are we in trouble? Are the bad guys coming? David knelt down to Emma's level. No, Mija, we're not in trouble. But we need to help Sarah stay safe, so we're going somewhere even safer. Will we still be together? All 3 of us? David looked at Sarah, who nodded firmly. Yes, Emma, we're staying together. As they loaded the car and prepared to leave the peaceful cabin behind, David realized that somewhere along the way, the three of them had become more than just strangers thrown together by circumstance. They had become something like a family. Now they just had to survive long enough to catch the people trying to destroy them. The safe house was an ordinary-looking duplex in a residential neighborhood, but David noticed the reinforced windows and security cameras disguised as decorative elements. Detective Williams met them at the door with two other officers David didn't recognize. Sarah, I need to brief you on what we discovered about Hayes, Williams said, as they settled into the living room. Emma was already exploring the house, having spotted a toy chest in the corner. What did you find? Hayes didn't just disappear. He cleaned out his bank accounts totaling over $300,000. That's way more money than a lieutenant should have, even with 20 years on the force. Sarah winced as she adjusted her position on the couch. So he was definitely taking payments from someone. But $300,000 suggests this operation is much bigger than we thought. David was helping Emma set up a board game when something Williams said caught his attention. Did you say Hayes had 20 years on the force? Yes, why? Sarah, you said you were taken when you were 7 and that was before your adoption was finalized. How old are you now? 28? David felt a chill run down his spine. So you were taken 21 years ago, right around the time Hayes would have been starting his career. Williams and Sarah stared at David, the implications sinking in. David, that's impossible, Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. Is it? Sarah, do you remember anything about the police officer who found you when you were taken? Sarah's face went pale. It was a young officer. He found me in an abandoned warehouse. He was so kind, he stayed with me until my adoptive parents came to get me. He said his name was Tom, she whispered. He said his name was Tom. Williams was already pulling out his phone. I'm calling for Hayes's complete service record. If he was involved in child trafficking 20 years ago and then positioned himself to investigate these cases now, he'd have access to all the information about ongoing investigations. Sarah finished. He could prevent cases from being solved while appearing to be a dedicated officer. Emma looked up from her game. Are you talking about the bad police officer? The one who hurt Sarah? Yes, Emma, David said, sitting beside his daughter. But we're going to catch him. Williams' phone rang and he answered immediately. Detective Williams. What? Are you absolutely sure? Keep this quiet until I get there. He hung up and turned to face them, his expression grim. That was Captain Rodriguez. They found Lieutenant Hayes. Where? Sarah asked. Dead in his car about 50 miles north of the city. Apparent suicide. With a confession note. Sarah struggled to stand, her face a mixture of relief and disappointment. So it's over? That's the problem. Captain Rodriguez doesn't think the confession is legitimate. The handwriting looks forced and Hayes was left-handed, but the note was written with his right hand. David felt his protective instincts kick in. So someone killed Hayes to silence him and now they'll try to close all these cases by blaming everything on a dead man. Exactly. Which means the real mastermind is still out there, and you're all still in danger. Emma had been listening intently despite their attempts to speak quietly. Dad, are we going to live here now? Just for a little while longer, Mija. William's phone buzzed with a text message. His expression changed as he read it. Sarah, you need to see this. Captain Rodriguez wants you to come in for a debriefing tomorrow morning, but look at the timestamp on this message. Sarah examined Williams's phone. This was sent 20 minutes before you called Captain Rodriguez about Hayes being found dead. How could he know to schedule a debriefing before he knew Hayes was dead? The room fell silent as the implications hit them. David was the first to speak. Captain Rodriguez is involved. That's impossible, Sarah said. I've known Captain Rodriguez for 5 years. He's been nothing but supportive of my career. Williams was already moving toward the window, checking the street outside. Sarah. Who recommended you for the Missing Children Task Force? Captain Rodriguez. He said he thought I'd bring a unique perspective to the cases because of my own background. And who would have access to all the case files, all the operational plans, and the ability to manipulate evidence? Sarah sank back onto the couch, her face showing the betrayal she felt. A captain would have access to everything. David, we need to get Emma out of here. If Rodriguez knows about this safe house. He does, Williams said, still watching the street. I see 2 unmarked cars that weren't here when we arrived. David's military training from years earlier kicked in. Where's the back exit? Kitchen leads to a small yard, but it's fenced. Emma, come here right now, David called. His daughter immediately sensed the urgency and ran to him. We're going to play a game where we have to be very quiet and very fast, okay? Emma nodded solemnly. Williams handed Sarah a service weapon. Can you shoot with your non-dominant hand? If I have to. They moved quickly through the house toward the kitchen. Williams went first, checking the backyard for threats. The fence was only 6 feet tall, manageable for adults, but challenging for Emma. David, I'll boost Emma over. Then you climb over and I'll hand her down to you, Sarah said. What about you? You can't climb with that broken arm. I'll figure it out. They heard car doors slamming in the front of the house. Williams appeared at the kitchen door. 3 men approaching the front, 2 more covering the back alley. We need to move now. David lifted Emma up to the fence line. Climb over carefully, Mija. I'll be right behind you. As Emma disappeared over the fence, they heard the front door being kicked in. Sarah pushed David toward the fence. Go. I'll be right behind you. David hauled himself over the fence and caught Emma as she dropped down. Sarah, come on. Sarah appeared at the top of the fence, struggling with her injured arm. David reached up to help her down just as they heard shouting from inside the house. There's an alley about 50 yards that way, Sarah pointed. My car is parked on the next street over. They ran through the backyards of several houses, Emma keeping pace despite her shorter legs. Behind them, they could hear men shouting and the sound of pursuit. When they reached Sarah's car, Williams was already there, having escaped through a different route. Get in. Rodriguez just put out an APB on all 3 of you. He's claiming you're armed and dangerous. As they drove through the city, Emma finally asked the question David had been dreading. Dad, why are the police trying to catch us? I thought police were supposed to help people. Most police do help people, Emma, but sometimes bad people pretend to be good police officers. That's why Sarah is a real police officer. She's trying to stop the bad ones. Sarah turned in the passenger seat to face Emma. Emma, your dad is right. Most police officers are good people who want to help kids like you, but a few bad ones sometimes trick people. Are we going to catch the bad ones? Yes, Sarah said firmly. We are. Williams checked his rearview mirror constantly as they drove. I've been thinking about this all wrong. Rodriguez has been running this operation for years, using his position to identify vulnerable children and selling them through illegal adoption networks. He recruited Hayes and probably others to help cover up the investigations. But why keep the children local? Why not move them far away immediately? David asked. Because the adoptive families are probably local too. Rich families who can't adopt through legitimate channels due to background issues, criminal records, or other disqualifying factors. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. It's from an unknown number, she said, reading it. It says, bring the mechanic and his daughter to the old Riverside warehouse at midnight. Come alone or Tommy Brennan dies. You have 3 hours. Emma's eyes went wide. Tommy, the missing boy? They found him? Williams pulled over to the side of the road. It's a trap, Sarah. Rodriguez is trying to get all 3 of you in one place. Maybe, Sarah said. But what if Tommy is really there? What if this is our only chance to save him? David looked at his daughter, then at Sarah, and realized that everything they'd been through had led to this moment. The choice between safety and doing what was right. Sarah, he said quietly, what do you need us to do? The Riverside warehouse stood like a dark monument against the night sky, its broken windows reflecting the city lights across the water. David parked 2 blocks away, his hands shaking slightly as he turned off the engine. I still think this is a terrible idea, Williams said for the 3rd time. We should call in the FBI. Rodriguez has contacts everywhere in local law enforcement, Sarah replied, checking her service weapon one more time. By the time federal agents mobilized, Tommy could be dead or moved again. Emma had been unusually quiet during the drive. Now she looked up at the adults with serious eyes. I want to help save Tommy. Absolutely not, David said immediately. Emma, you're staying in the car with Detective Williams. But Dad, what if Tommy is scared? What if he needs to see another kid to know it's safe? Sarah looked at Emma with new respect. She has a point, David, but it's too dangerous. Williams checked his watch. 11:45. Sarah, if you're going through with this, you need to go now. David made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. Emma and I are coming with you, Sarah, but we do this together and we do it smart. David, I can't ask you to put Emma in danger. You're not asking. I'm deciding. That boy in there has been away from his family for 3 weeks. Emma's right. Seeing another child might be exactly what he needs. They approached the warehouse using the shadows of abandoned buildings for cover. The area had been industrial once, but most of the businesses had moved away years ago. It was the perfect place for illegal activities. There, Sarah whispered, pointing to a dim light in a second-floor window. That's the only sign of activity. Williams had circled around to cover the back entrance while the three of them approached the front. David carried Emma on his back to keep her feet from making noise on the broken glass and debris. The warehouse's main door was slightly ajar. Sarah went first, her weapon drawn but held low. David followed with Emma, his heart pounding so loud he was sure everyone could hear it. Inside, the warehouse was filled with storage containers and makeshift rooms created with hanging plastic sheets. The smell of mold and dampness filled the air. They followed the sound of voices toward the back of the building. I don't care what your orders were, a man's voice said angrily. This whole operation is blown. We need to move the kids tonight. Captain Rodriguez wants the cop and the mechanic alive, another voice replied. He has plans for them. Sarah held up 3 fingers, indicating 3 suspects. David nodded and whispered to Emma, When I put you down, I want you to hide behind those boxes and don't come out until I call for you. They crept closer until they could see into the makeshift room. Captain Rodriguez stood with his back to them, talking to 2 men in civilian clothes. In the corner, 4 children sat on mattresses, including a boy who matched Tommy Brennan's description. Tommy looks okay, Emma whispered, barely audible. That tiny whisper was enough. One of the men turned toward their hiding spot. Captain, we've got company. Everything happened at once. Sarah stepped into the room with her weapon raised. Metro Police. Everyone on the ground. Rodriguez spun around, drawing his own weapon. Officer Chen, you're under arrest for kidnapping and interfering with a police investigation. The only one under arrest here is you, Rodriguez. We know about the illegal adoption network, the murdered children's families, everything. One of the civilian men lunged toward the children, but David was faster. His years of physical work had kept him strong, and he tackled the man before he could reach Tommy. Emma, stay hidden, David shouted as he wrestled with the suspect. The second man tried to flee but ran directly into Williams, who had entered through the back door at the sound of the commotion. Rodriguez kept his weapon trained on Sarah. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Chen, this operation has been running for 15 years. We've placed over 100 children with loving families who couldn't adopt any other way. You've stolen children from their real families and sold them to the highest bidder. Their real families were broken, abusive, neglectful. We gave these children better lives. Tommy Brennan spoke up from his corner, his voice small but clear. I want to go home to my mom and dad. See? Sarah said. Even after 3 weeks, he knows where he belongs. Rodriguez's face twisted with rage. You've destroyed everything. 15 years of careful work, hundreds of families who will be torn apart. Families built on lies and stolen children, David said, having successfully subdued his attacker. Emma, it's safe now. You can come out. Emma emerged from behind the boxes and immediately went to the other children. Hi, I'm Emma. Are you guys okay? The police are here to take you home. The sight of his daughter comforting the rescued children made David's chest swell with pride. She had inherited the best parts of both her parents, his protective instincts and her mother's natural empathy. Rodriguez was still holding his weapon when Williams appeared behind him. Captain, drop your weapon. It's over. It's never over, Rodriguez snarled. You have no idea how many people are involved in this. Judges, social workers, adoption agencies, police officers in 6 different departments. Then you'd better start talking, Sarah said, because your cooperation is the only thing that might keep you out of a federal prison for the rest of your life. 2 hours later, the warehouse was swarming with FBI agents, paramedics, and social workers. The 4 rescued children were being reunited with their families, while Rodriguez and his associates were being processed for federal charges. Tommy Brennan's parents arrived together. Despite their divorce, and their tears of relief filled the warehouse. David watched as the family embraced, thinking about how close they'd come to never seeing each other again. Dad, Emma said, tugging on his sleeve, are Sarah and Detective Williams going to be okay? They're not in trouble for helping us, are they? No, mija. They're heroes. The FBI is going to need their help to catch all the other bad people involved in this. Sarah approached them, her arm still in a sling, but her face showing relief for the first time in days. The FBI wants to interview all of us tomorrow, but we're free to go home tonight. Home, David repeated, realizing he wasn't sure where that was anymore. Their house had been broken into, they'd been on the run for days, and everything familiar had been turned upside down. David, Sarah said quietly, if you want, you and Emma could stay at my apartment tonight. It's probably safer than going back to Maple Street right away. Emma's face lit up. Can we, Dad? I want to make sure Sarah's okay with her hurt arm. 3 months later, David stood in the kitchen of their house on Maple Street, making pancakes for Sunday breakfast. The investigation had revealed a network involving over 50 people in various positions of authority, leading to arrests across 3 states. Sarah had been commended for her dedication to the case and promoted to detective. Dad, is Sarah coming for breakfast today? Emma called from the living room where she was working on a jigsaw puzzle. She said she'd be here by 9, David replied, smiling at how naturally Emma had incorporated Sarah into their weekly routine. When Sarah arrived, Emma ran to hug her carefully, mindful of the arm that was finally out of its cast. Sarah, I finished the puzzle of the cabin. Want to see? Of course. David watched from the kitchen doorway as Sarah and Emma examined the completed puzzle together. Over the past few months, the 3 of them had developed a rhythm that felt natural and right. Sarah had officially moved in 2 weeks ago, after David had finally worked up the courage to ask her. You know, Sarah said, looking up at David, I was thinking we should take Emma back to the cabin sometime soon. For a real vacation this time, not because we're running from anyone. Can we fish in the lake? Emma asked excitedly. We can definitely try. Your dad might need to teach us both how, though. David felt a warmth spread through his chest as he looked at his 2 favorite people. I think that sounds perfect. The investigation had changed all their lives, but in the end, it had brought them exactly what they needed. A real family built on trust, love, and the shared experience of doing what was right even when it was dangerous. Dad, Emma said, looking up from her puzzle, are you going to marry Sarah? Both adults froze, staring at Emma's innocent, expectant face. Emma, David said slowly, that's a very personal question, but I heard you talking about it last night when you thought I was asleep. Sarah laughed, the sound filling the house with warmth. Emma, how would you feel if your dad and I got married? I think it would be awesome. Then Sarah could be my mom, and we could all live together forever, and I'd have 2 parents who are heroes. David knelt down beside his daughter and Sarah. Emma, Sarah becoming your stepmother wouldn't change how much I love you, and it wouldn't replace your birth mother. I know, Dad, but Sarah chose to be part of our family, which means she really wants to be here. That's different. Sarah wiped away a tear, her voice thick with emotion. Emma, being part of your family is the best thing that's ever happened to me. So is that a yes? Are you getting married? David looked at Sarah, seeing his own emotions reflected in her eyes. Sarah, I know this isn't the most romantic proposal, but Emma's right. We've already become a family. Would you like to make it official? Yes, Sarah said simply. To all of it. To being Emma's stepmother, to being your wife, to making this house our home together. Emma cheered and hugged them both. This is the best Sunday ever. As they sat down to breakfast together, David reflected on how finding Sarah that night in the woods had changed everything. What had started as an act of basic human kindness had led to love, family, and a future he'd never imagined possible. Sometimes, he thought, the most important moments in life happen when you're simply doing the right thing without knowing where it will lead.